I've got a problem, and it's you! Every time we make one of these awesome looking helmets, so many of you are in our comments saying, oh, that's too expensive. If I had a $50,000, $60,000 printer, I could do that too. Well, wrong, dumb, you! Today, I'm gonna show you how you can make an awesome looking helmet like this on a very cheap 3D printer that you can get this Black Friday. Ah! There's a lot of feelings about that, but it's true. You don't need an expensive or even a large 3D printer to print cosplay items like this helmet or other props. 3D printing technology has gotten so much better since the 2010s. Quality has gone up while price has gone down. So today I'm going to show you how you can make an awesome looking Helldivers helmet just like this one on one of the smallest printers. Bambu sent us this A1 Mini. They also sent us an H2S, one of their largest printers. So when this becomes part of your personality, making helmets and props, you'll be able to see what kind of benefit you can get from spending a little bit more money into this hobby. So I'm gonna take you step by step through making an awesome helmet like this one, and we're gonna break down the price so you get a nice clear picture of what you're in for. We're gonna start with the printer. Now this is the Bambu Lab A1 Mini. Right now this printer is $200 on their site thanks to Black Friday, and this little thing has a lot going for itself. It's practically ready to go out of the box. I was able to set it up in just under 20 minutes. It's fully ready for multicolor 3D printing, does its own calibration tests. It's got sensors for power loss recovery, filament tangling, filament runout, and more. And it even has a camera which you can use to record time lapses of your prints. And to cap it all off, for a bed slinging printer, this gives you some great results. So the first thing we're gonna do is take our BO1 helmet file, that's also on sale for Black Friday, and take it into Bambu Studio. We've got to cut it up into a lot of small pieces to fit on that build volume of the A1 Mini, but we're gonna print it out and then take it over to the studio. I actually need all these back in the box. It's showmanship, Tyler. So we've got our McDonald's Helldiver here, printed in a ton of really small parts. So the first step is gonna be to put all these together. I'm gonna show you a few different ways we can do that. This step is one of the most important. It can either add a lot of work for you later, or if you do it really well, take your time, it will save you a lot of time as you go forward. So the first thing I'm gonna do is sand all the edges of my parts on a flat plane of 120 grit sandpaper. This is gonna make sure our parts have a cleaner fit when we glue them all together. As accurate as 3D printing is, it does have a small amount of variance in all these prints, which can compound when you got a lot of parts like this. So now that these pieces are lining up much closer together, we could start to glue them. So I'm gonna be using some CA glue and some activator spray. Now this stuff is really strong at holding 3D prints together, so much so that it's actually stronger than the bonds of the 3D print itself. So if you try and rip this apart, the print will rip before the glue does. It's kind of our bread and butter. The activator spray binds it in like a second or two, so be very careful not to get any on your fingers. And as you can see, I'm applying a thin bead between the helmet pieces to tack them together and then align the parts. I'm using my thumbs to really make sure there's a smooth transition from part to part, and when I'm ready, I hit the parts with the activator spray. By the way, do this in a pretty well ventilated area. This glue is pretty strong, pretty smelly. So we got this edge glued together. It definitely takes a lot more time to assemble a helmet like this in a lot of smaller parts than if we had it printed in one big piece. But a $200 printer compared to like a $1,000 printer might be worth it. The next thing we need to do is reinforce our parts, because as good as CA glue is, it's a little bit brittle. So I'm gonna be showing you guys 3 different tools that you can use for the job. The first being a classic soldering iron. The soldering iron kind of melts and pushes material around. The 3D pen also does that, however, it's additive, not subtractive. With a soldering iron, you might accidentally melt a little bit too much and kind of make a thin spot for yourself. But here I'm just kind of welding those two parts together. I know it's not technically welding, but the idea behind it is pretty similar. And if you see any gaps in your print, you can easily use the pen to bridge those gaps by adding PLA between them. So if you're tired of asking nicely, we also have an option like this. It's a heat staple gun. It's a little bit of a nuclear option, but it uses metal staples that are a little bit zigzagged to kind of submerge itself in the plastic and keep those two halves together. Not really ideal for a helmet because you will have some kind of sharp metal barbs at the end, even after you've clipped it off. Press it right into the plastic. Oh, that did not let go as I hoped. I'm gonna clip off these metal prongs here, safety squints. No matter how close you cut them, you still have a little bit of a metal prong. Not ideal for a helmet that goes on your head. Just gonna bury those little prongs in filament. So after trying all those, I'm deciding to stick with the 3D pen because it's giving me a similar benefit to the soldering iron, but its additive quality means I can cover our seam lines more efficiently. So with that, I started sub-assembling the dome, faceplate, and back neck parts. Now kind of the real challenge begins because when we start to glue together these big parts, any kind of small errors that we made in alignment on all the small parts really compound and all add up here at the end. Luckily for us, I'm really good at this, so we have a pretty good alignment to work with. This really long edge, I'm gonna make sure to only do a small section to just tack it in. Make sure that the front is as aligned as possible. If you have to sacrifice an edge because it's just not lining up, make sure it's not the front. You want the front to look as good as possible all the time. So upon closer inspection, our McDonald's diver is in a really good spot for pre-assembly. We are gonna put all of these parts together so that we have one big finished piece. When you're doing that, really good file designers like ourselves have keys and alignment tabs that help orient all these parts together. Makes gluing sub-assembled parts much more straightforward and easy when you have those alignment tabs. And overall, I'm really happy with the seams here. It's really gonna save some time for our next step. I have it like, like I'm carrying a football right now. I just gotta keep it pressed together while this glue sets. Next is filling and sanding, and that's kind of an overarching topic. The first thing we're gonna take care of is the seam lines. Now the difference between seam lines and layer lines, seam lines are the lines between parts that we glued together earlier. Layer lines are just all over the print itself. Layer lines are not too bad to manage. Seam lines, however, despite our best efforts to get things as smooth and flush as possible, there is like 0.5 millimeter here, 1 millimeter there of a ridge between these parts. So our first step is gonna be to smooth those out, plane them off. We're gonna do that in a couple of different ways. The first method we're gonna try is using a file set. You can get a decent set for about $10 to $15, and I think they're great for planing off that very top layer of plastic to get those seams down. A good set of files should be in every cosplayer's toolkit. But what if you want something with a bit more room? If you got a little bit of extra money, this is what I really love to use, the Decal file sander. It's got like a 1/2 inch sandpaper band on here. It spins really well, and it's gonna hawk off plastic, and we can have the precision to focus on those seam lines. So this is gonna make very quick work of all these seam lines. However, you do wanna be careful, because like I said, it will hawk off plastic, and if you go too far, too long, too deep, it's really gonna mess up the print. We're trying to just mar the surface a little bit to save us some time when sanding. So. And as you can see, I'm being really gentle with the detail sander because in addition to the fast moving sanding belt, there's a lot of friction building up on the print itself. So be sure to always keep your detail sander moving. Don't stay in one spot for too long. Okay, yeah, made really quick work of that. Had a really low grit sandpaper roll on here, so it was just hawking off material. It was actually heating up the plastic faster than it was removing it, so had a little bit of some minor heat spots that we had to revisit. But the seams between these parts are much smoother now. Now we can really get to filling in those layer lines on the print all over the helmet and really start smoothing this thing out. Pause. That was a lot of work that I just did there. You want to skip it all? Well, that's where a bigger printer is really going to help you. If you get something like this, H2S from Bambu Lab, for example, you can print a lot of helmets in one piece. That is going to save you a lot of time if you're doing a lot of different helmets. You can skip that assembly phase, reinforcing all those seams. We get to skip filling in all those seams, and it's going to make sanding so much easier. And the quality from Bambu printers are just amazing. As you could tell, we kind of love them here for all of our stuff. These H2S printers are absolutely amazing at helmets. You certainly can make an A1 Mini work for cosplay, but it's definitely gonna cost you a lot more in terms of man hours. So let's get this off the printer and let's check it out. Little tip here, always block supports underneath the dome. You don't really need them. The inside looks a little bit gnarly, but the outside, much cleaner, and it saves you a ton of time printing your helmet, as well as material costs. So this helmet is the same scale as our other one. It's in one piece, came out absolutely beautifully. This is gonna be such a treat to finish as opposed to the one that's in like 16 different parts. So let's, oh, look at that. That's amazing. So the next step I like to do for the filling and sanding process is use a filler primer. Now, there's lots of different filler primers that you can use. We started with this Rust-Oleum filler primer. These are basically like high build spray paints, so they're very thick. They work great at filling in the layer lines on your helmets. But started with Rust-Oleum because it was cheap, easy to find. However, after trying so many different products, this is our preferred one now. It has the best spray, it has the best coverage, it dries the fastest. It just has all these better options. It's a little bit more expensive than something like this. However, if you value your time at all, you'll have a much better time using a product like Seymour. So let's go get some Seymour on this helmet. Over at the paint booth, I'm gonna apply 3 coats of Seymour filler primer to the helmet and detail parts. Seymour dries really fast, so I'm gonna give each coat a full 20 minutes to dry before applying the next. All right, next day, all of our Seymour has dried fully. Now we're ready to really fight these seam lines between the parts. To do that, we're gonna be using some of this USC icing. It is a body filler, so it's really good at filling in some big gaps between parts, like the seam lines across our helmets. We've already kind of planed them off, but now we still need to fill in any small gaps between them. We're also gonna be using Bondo glazing and spot putty to chase any of the small remaining layer lines that the Seymour either couldn't really fill because they're too hidden or recessed, or they're just, the layer lines are too thick, even for 3 coats of Seymour. So I'm gonna mix this up, put on the respirator, and get to filling. So first up is our automotive icing. I'm starting by putting a quarter-sized glob of the icing, followed by mixing it with a half pea-sized dot of the hardener. A little bit of hardener goes a long way. If you put too much hardener in it, it's gonna harden too fast. You won't be able to apply it onto the helmet. But with this amount, I should be able to get about 5 minutes to work with it. You just wanna make sure that you mix it up really well to where it's a consistent color, a very, very light blue-white. For application, I'm gonna be using a piece of foam as well as some cardstock to push the icing over the seams and to get them into those recesses. The icing that we're using is a body filler as opposed to the Bondo glazing and spot putty. The glazing and spot putty is more of a detail area, whereas this body filler is meant for more large gap filling. If you use Bondo glazing and spot putty in too large of quantities, it's gonna crack or it's gonna split as it's drying. So we wanna avoid that by using the right type of filler. We are gonna use that Bondo glazing and spot putty, however, to chase after the non-seam line trouble spots, like areas that had supports interacting with the print or curves that turned into really steep layer lines. Pretty good. So now that our putty is fully hardened, we are ready to finally start sanding. And sanding is the part that nobody loves to do, so we've done as much as we can to minimize the amount of sanding that we've done so far. Basically, our mindset here is that we want to sand the filler, not the print. So we've been adding stuff to the print But now it's time to start subtracting through sanding. I'm gonna start with around 120 grit to 180 or so. You can either hand sand it if you wanna save some money, or pick yourself up something like a mouse sander or powered sander. It's gonna save yourself a lot of time and a lot of shoulder pressure from all the sanding that we're gonna have to do. But we should be able to wrap up sanding in about 1 to 2 hours total. For our sanding process, I'm starting at 120 grit on our cheap mouse sander. And much like our detail filer, I don't want to stay in the same place for too long, so I'm constantly moving my tool around to get an even application. I'm also periodically cleaning the helmet off of any dust, and as you can tell, this process is really messy and you can easily overlook spots you missed. Next, I'm moving up to 180 grit with hand sanding all the areas our mouse sander couldn't really get to. Remember not to overdo it. We're trying to smooth things out and not remove all of our filler, so taking your time is important. So right now we're going to repeat the process of Bondo, Seymour, and sanding while raising the grit to 200 and then 300 grit. So why is the helmet black all of a sudden? Well, I did something called an ID coat on it. I just sprayed a thin layer of black primer on it and did a little bit of sanding on this backside here. What this is gonna do is, see this area that's still black down the middle? That means that's a low spot. And so we're gonna need to add a little bit more filler in that area specifically. So I'm gonna just do a light sanding all around the helmet to really help us identify spots that still need filled, still need gap filler, any imperfection, we want to highlight it using this method. So I'm gonna just do some hand sanding really fast. Most people don't really like hand sanding, but I'm gonna try and have some fun with this stupid thing. Yeah, don't need this at all. Might not even work well, but I'm gonna try it out. Got like a 180 grit sandpaper on there, so we're gonna start slowly rising in that grit range for a smoother helmet finish. So let's see where our trouble spots are. This is such a dumb idea. I'm not gonna be able to put this on. It's just caked with stuff right now, which means it's working, but I don't have a really good way to swap it out. Yeah. Don't worry, I've got lots more. And oh. Tyler, can you give me a hand, please? Yeah, dab me up. All right, well that made a great big mess of everything, but we do see some spots. All this horizontal banding here, that's some print layers coming through, so we're gonna fill that with some more Seymour. We've got some big shifts here still that we'll fill with something like Bondo, or maybe more icing putty. Still lots to do on this helmet, but making good progress. We're just gonna keep repeating that. Seymour, Bondo, putty, wherever necessary, around 2 more times most likely. Sanding it after each time and slowly going up through that grit range. So earlier I showed you some big files we used to plane off the Seamlines. Well, I'm also using the smaller files from that same set to clean up a lot of the detail work that gets kind of filled in with primer or Bondo. These are great. There's a huge variety of different styles you can use. Each has their purpose, but it's gonna help us chase after those details. And after picking at some details, I Seymoured the helmet one last time, followed by an additional black primer coat to prep for wet sanding. Here I have the yuck bucket. It is the bucket filled with water and lots of sediment of sanded materials. So the benefits of wet sanding is that we get a much smoother surface. It's gonna be our last sanding surface before we start painting, so we want it to be as clean as possible. So we're gonna dip the helmet in this yucky water and we're gonna sand this ID coat away. The ID coat, again, just shows us what we have not sanded yet so far. So we're looking for a nice uniform surface after we're done sanding. That means that the surface is smooth, we've hit all the spots, and it's ready for painting. Honestly, even taking this thing up to 400 might be a little bit overkill. So the BO1 has kind of a metallic finish, but it's not super reflective. Typically, for like a Mando helmet, for example, something that's really reflective and shiny, you want to take that up to 600 or 800 grit. But your typical like Helldivers, Spartans, clones even, stuff that's not too shiny, I usually stop at 300 or 400 grit. Please, I got tons to spare.
So much left to go around.
My bucket runneth over. Once I felt the wet sanding was complete, I washed the helmet with soap and water to get any remaining particles off, dried it off in front of a fan, and then primed the helmet black. And yes, now we're finally ready to paint. So now that we put all that work into sanding and smoothing the helmet, we're finally ready to start painting. And Arrowhead actually made painting pretty easy for us. They put out an official cosplay guide for the helmet, the armor, everything that includes full color codes for everything. We just kind of grabbed what we had on hand that kind of matched it, so don't feel like you have to use these. We will link them in the description though. But what we're looking for are kind of 4 main color groups. We have a dark gray, almost black, for the face, center stripe, back. We have a dark metallic for these big side panels here. We have a bright yellow for the stripes and any kind of decals. And we have a metallic aluminum for these little greeblies on the side and the vents on the front. Now, whatever paint colors you choose, I would recommend getting some test shapes to test on. So these are speed shapes, a little bit pricier to test on. You'd be just fine with some plastic spoons, but you should always test your colors, make sure that they look good next to each other, make sure that they spray well before you start working on your full helmet. But with all those colors sorted, let's get started. So first stop on our painting journey is coating the faceplate, brow, and main stripe in Montana Black Coke. This paint isn't quite black, but it's a pretty dark gray that we'll use for depth. And once it's dry, we're moving on to taping those areas off with some frog tape to get the outline, followed by blue painter's tape for the larger area. One thing I'm going to do throughout this build is anytime we're going to be painting over taped or masked off areas, I'm going to be painting it first with the original base coat. That's going to kind of seal off the tape and prevent any bleeding underneath the tape when we apply our color. That's going to give us some real nice crisp lines. Now with that base coat applied to prevent any bleeding under the tape, we're going to cover the rest of our helmet with that Rust-Oleum metallic. And before we go any further, we're going to let our helmet fully dry, take off all of our masking tape, and hit it with a satin clear coat. This clear coat will protect our first 2 layers, and it kind of acts like a save point for our paint job. I let that sit overnight, and the next day I'm ready for our yellow stripes. Now we have used a laser grid in the past, but honestly, I just freehanded and eyeballed it using frog tape and the Helldiver Cosplay guide as a reference. After taping up the rest of the helmet, I headed back to add a satin clear coat that I let dry before hitting the area with my ginger yellow. With that comes the fun part, peeling off all the tape to see our helmet colors. Now I didn't do this on camera, but if you do have any colors bleed under, a toothpick is a great way to scratch away any unwanted color. And with that, we head back one more time to clear coat with satin to seal all of our colors. All right, we've got our helmet coming well along. Now it's time to start adding some of the little details. So we've got some vinyl stickers for the Helldiver logos that are going to go on the sides here, as well as some little yellow triangles that go behind the ear piece here. We're also going to put our visor in. We made these on our silhouette. However, in this case, you probably just want to get them off of Etsy. There's lots of makers out there that sell these. But we vacuum formed this visor to be game accurate to its geometry. We sell them in the shop. Check it out. It's the best price you're going to get without setting up a whole vacuum forming deal. But let's start with the stickers. These are pretty easy. As far as placement goes, they kind of go just right there behind the visor. All right, so now we're gonna do some weathering. Weathering really is the stage that can cover a lot of the sins of the finishing job before that. So I have a couple of them on this helmet that I'm gonna cover up with what's called an oil wash. We're gonna need a little bit of black oil paints and some mineral spirits. Now, mineral spirits is a thinner for oil-based paints like this oil paint here. We're gonna thin it out. We're gonna brush it all over the helmet. That's gonna give a quick way to add some grime or some dirt, make it look like this Helldiver was actually out in the field. To do our oil wash, I'm gonna be adding a small glob of black oil paint with a splash of mineral spirits. And because we're using an enamel clear coat, the mineral spirits won't affect our paint job. So be sure you use one as well. Here I'm using a small sponge brush and applying our wash to sections all over the helmet, followed by random dabs using a paper towel to pull away some of the wash. We'll want our wash to get in every little corner, especially on our detail parts, which will get knocked down a bit in tone, unifying the helmet at the same time. Once we're happy with our wash, we'll leave it to dry off. So finally, the last thing we need to do is put this visor in the helmet. Now, if you do get a visor from us that's been vacuum formed, dyed, and polished, they're usually untrimmed for a few reasons, but mostly because you might have scaled your helmet differently. You might not have printed it at 100%, and having a little bit of extra flashing around the edges in case you need to do that is always helpful. So here I'm trimming the edges of the visor to make sure we don't have too much overlapping plastic inside the helmet. Then I'm breaking out our beloved steel stick to adhere our visor inside the helmet. To do this, I'm cutting off about a 1/2 inch steel stick section and rubbing it together while wearing gloves until it's a nice uniform color. Now, steel stick will have an exothermic reaction, so you'll start to feel it really warm up in your hands. When it's that nice uniform color, start applying it to the left and the right side of the visor. Be sure to check that your visor is fully seated as your steel stick hardens, and after that we can apply a bit more steel stick to the top and bottom of your visor. And with that, we've officially finished our build of the BO1 Tactical Helldiver Helmet, taking it all the way from a 3D file to a finished prop in your hand. But now it's time to answer the question, what is the real cost of 3D printing cosplay? Okay, that was a lot of fun. We have our finished helmet here. It's still the McDonald's diver, no trickery of the camera or anything like that. But let's break down the cost of what it takes to get the 3D printed cosplay parts. Your 3D printer and your filament, those are gonna be your obvious ones. However, we've also broken down all of the different little consumables that we use throughout this build. We have a bare bones version and we have kind of a little niceties version. The bare bones of all the different consumables that you have to buy, all of your cans, everything, came out to around $437. That does include the filament and the printer. So that sounds like a lot, but your next helmet is only gonna cost around $50 to $75. You've already got your printer, you're gonna have some more filament, you've already got all of your different rattle cans of spray paints, your fillers, all of your little files and sandpapers. So your next helmet is gonna be even cheaper, like way cheaper. And your third and fourth and fifth, and hopefully this kind of takes over your life like it has us, are gonna be way cheaper than this first upfront initial investment. So along the build, we also showed you some quality of life things that you can get to really improve your time making helmets like this, like a 3D pen, a detail file sander, a mouse sander, things that are gonna make your life much more enjoyable finishing these props. That total, with all those previous items, came out to around $570. So still really cheap. You're gonna have a much better time using some of those power tools as opposed to doing it all bare bones. But if you remember, we also printed this helmet here on our Bambu Lab H2S that they sent us in one piece. We absolutely love that printer. If this takes over your whole personality, definitely recommend getting a larger size printer that you can print helmets in one piece. They are more expensive, obviously. We all love them here. Even our employees here are buying them for home, that we love them that much. They are great machines for parts like helmets, armor, cosplay items because of that large volume and great print quality. But that's not all the H2S does. Bambu Lab actually sent us the laser version of the H2S. It comes with laser cutting, vinyl cutting. We're testing it out with all sorts of different materials. It's an all-in-one kind of hobby machine right in your house. It's amazing. We're trying out some new things with it. Very excited to try out more. So one cost we didn't really cover in this episode was the cost of 3D files. Now there are lots of places you can get free 3D files that are usually pretty good, but if you want the best tested files out there, you're usually gonna have to pay for them. And there are lots of places you can buy from, but the best deal you're gonna find is the Galactic Armory Patreon. For just $15 a month, you get all of our files released in the current and previous month, plus a slew of new instant exclusives immediately. We put all of our experience finishing helmets into the design of them as well, so they're super easy to print put together, and paint. And we're running both a Black Friday sale on the Patreon for 50% off your first month, as well as individual file sales on the website for 50% off during Black Friday weekend onto Cyber Monday. So if you want to get your hands on some quality 3D files to make your printing experience the best it can be, go check out the Patreon, go check out the website to help support us make more awesome files, more awesome videos for you guys like this one. So a bit of a longer video. Thank you all for staying with us, but we really wanted to cram as much information as we could into this one video. So I hope it's useful for you in the future in your prop making career. I hope you try it out this Black Friday, this winter. It's an amazing hobby. It's so fulfilling to make stuff that you see in video games and TV right in your living room, and we're showing you how to do it. So thank you again for watching. We'll see you next time.